Hi, Night Owls. The video you're about to see is not my best. I'll be making another video shortly on this same topic, covering this same content, where the presentation will be more professional and I won't be quite so drunk. View this video as more for entertainment purposes rather than educational purposes, so the content in there is just as educational as the professional version will be. Enjoy this version and await the version where I won't be quite so drunk. Welcome back, Night Owls, and tonight I'm gonna need a drink. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. Was I supposed to refrigerate this? I don't even know. As you can probably tell, I don't drink often, which probably means that glass is going to start to have a bit of an effect in the middle of this video. We'll see how entertaining that ends up being. But yes, the math I'm presenting here is so depressing it makes me want to get drunk, as you can see on the title here. I call it The Rise of Illogical Political Extremism and the Severe Measures It Would Take to Stop It. I say severe measures. I don't feel like what I'm proposing here is all that extreme, but it seems really different from what people are or aren't doing. Well, different from what they are doing, similar to stuff they aren't doing. Well, let's get into this. So, in an ideal opinion dynamics model, you start with people. They start with various opinions. I use a 5-position model where, without any particular topic, I just said, okay, presume positions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 1, 5 being extreme positions, and suppose they are radically extreme positions that violate some of the moral codes that I outlined in my video almost 2 years ago about mathematical refutation of political extremism. If you haven't seen that, I'll post a link to it in the description. Some percentages of the time, the speaker will convince the listener to move one step towards the speaker's position. Simple enough. And so I looked into some of the specifics of one particular model like this. What I presumed was that you're not going to be convinced by someone who's really, really far away from where your current position is. No, I just said, suppose if the speaker is one step away from the listener, there's a 10% chance that you'll actually get convinced. I didn't presume anything about dynamic networks or echo chambers. Some of that will show up later. Not so much the dynamic networks, but the echo chambers specifically. Dynamic networks being you choose who your friends are based on political views. Haven't gotten into that yet. But the presence of certain communities which already lean to one direction or the other, yeah, that I eventually got into. But first, just real simple, assume everyone's in a single community. They start talking to each other under those rules, and the results are rather promising. You pretty consistently get consensus somewhere. In this case, the consensus ends up being either at position 2 or position 3. I'm not sure why position 4 never showed up. But already we can kind of dismiss this model because political polarization is a thing that actually happens. And so any model that never shows political polarization can't be taken all that seriously. Another promising result of this. So we all know, or hopefully we're familiar with the saying, in any given conflict, it's incredibly rare for one side to be completely right or the other side to be completely right, and it's equally rare for both sides to be equally right. Usually there's some position somewhere in there that's just the most logical one. And you want to make sure that whatever model you have actually converges to that. And so I ran this again, assuming that I said, suppose for argument's sake that position number 4 was the most logical one. Right? It fits that idea of neither side is completely right, but they're also not both equally right. And I said, now suppose that if you were going to switch into position 4, instead of a 10% chance, that's now a 20% chance. And if you're going to switch out of position 4, instead of a 10% chance, that's now a 5% chance. Right? It's just easier to convince someone to take on a logical position and harder to convince someone to leave a logical position. And as you can see, pretty consistently, I ran this 12 different times and tabulated it. You got full consensus at position 4. Yay! So what am I getting drunk for? What's so depressing about this? Well, the depressing part is that this doesn't happen. But it's showing you what we want to happen. Importantly, that if there's something good about a position, people converge to it. And if there's something really wrong with a position, people will avoid it. Of course, the problem is, we know that political polarization happens. So whatever basic model we use has to display that. What if we introduce these, what I'm calling echo chambers? Rather than just having a bunch of people talking to each other, what if there are distinct groups and they each start off slanted in one direction or the other? What purpose does an echo chamber serve, by the way? The majority of your conversations will happen with other people within your little echo chamber. How much of a majority? The figure that I made up and stuck with for the duration of this set of simulations, 90%. It's a made-up figure. It'd be interesting to see what some accurate figure would be. I started with 10 groups of 100 imaginary people. I should mention this is entirely imaginary. This is run by computer analysis. And so I started with 5 low number leaning chambers and 5 high number leaning chambers. Since it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I might call the low numbers left and the high numbers right. But I started out, instead of assuming 100 people per chamber, which is what I assumed, 100 people per chamber just to get a small toy model, instead of assuming 20 people starting with each of positions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I said, what if it were 30 of position, in the left-leaning chambers, 30 of position 1, 25 of position 2, 20 of position 3, 15 of position 4, and 10 of position 5. And in the right-leaning chambers, 10 of position 1, 15 of position 2, 20 of position 3, 25 of position 4, 30 of position 5. Run this, see what happens, and you get convergence towards a consensus at opinion 3 in all 10 chambers. So these echo chambers are kind of temporary in that case. Good that it's happening, bad that it's not happening in real life. Which means what I'm even doing with these echo chamber models, it's not modeling reality. Oh, and starting to feel the wine a little bit. Yeah. Other times, one position, you could have something where you kind of have consensus split between two positions, right? But either way, that's not what we're actually observing. There is no polarization. And so without something that causes polarization, we won't know how to fix it. So how do we replicate observed polarization? My model here is based on the idea of confirmation bias. That each person not only has a built-in position, this is what I support, but a built-in allegiance. This is the side that I think are the good guys. You start off, if you support position 1, your allegiance on a scale from 0 to 100 is in the middle of the 1 block, right? If you view the 1 block as ranging from 0 to 20, and then once you're in 21 to 40, that's the 2 block. So the middle of the 1 block is a 10. So anyone who starts with position 1 is automatically assigned an allegiance of 10. Anyone who starts with a position of 2 is automatically assigned an allegiance of 30. In the middle, it's a 50, 4 is a 70, 5 is a 90. And now, how about instead of saying, when people are discussing this, instead of saying, this is the specific position I want to see, you let the boundaries between the positions represent questions. The particular conflict that motivated me to go through all this is the Israel-Palestine conflict. You want to talk about polarization? There we go. That maybe position 1, the leftmost position, would be Israel's founding was illegitimate and all the Jews should be expelled, and it should just be a single Arab Palestine. And position 5 being all the land was Jewish from 3,000 years ago, which almost nobody uses that particular reasoning, but saying that, or Israel has right of conquest or something, or the Balfour Declaration declares the establishment of a Jewish state, and that if the Arabs want a state, great, Jordan is Palestine, so Jordan should be the Palestinian state, and you use that as the political boundary. That being the illogical position 5. And so then you say, okay, so there's the question of, well, should people just be expelled to move somewhere else, right? Those being the boundaries between positions 1 and 2, or 4 and 5. Then between positions 2 and 3, and 3 and 4, maybe you go with, should Israel just have total dominance so that the land questionably recognized as State of Palestine would be under Israeli rule, Arabs would still live there, but wouldn't have citizenship, right? Maybe that would be position 4. And position 2 might be political boundaries should be redrawn so that anyone can live there and vote, but should be redrawn to prevent Jews from ever having a majority anywhere. And that might be position 2. And position 3 would be a two-state solution. Something along those lines. So, if you have this question of, if we're talking about validity of the existence of Israel to begin with, validity of the foundation of Israel to begin with, that would be the question between positions 1 and 2. And you would just answer, is this more pro-Israel or more pro-Palestine? Right? But you have to answer that, address that particular question. And so in a conversation, right, rather than just conversation, hey, what position do you support? The conversation has to be based on, or someone speaking about the answer to a specific question. And if you're the speaker, you'll say, or I'm on this side or that side of this particular question. And with the listener, this is where confirmation bias comes in. Not only is there that base 1 in 10 chance of moving towards an adjacent position, right? If someone's proposing something that's more than one step away from what you believe, you're going to say, no, that's nonsense. If it's just the one step away, you might be convinced. but you also have a built-in allegiance. Okay. And so the probability of you're actually moving is based on a standard odds multiplier. Odds being probability of moving divided by probability of not moving. So if it's a 10% chance of actually moving your position, the odds would be 1 in 9, or 1 out of 9, or 1 to 9. Now your allegiance, if you would be moving in a more pro-Palestine direction, but your allegiance, let's say, is 80 out of 100 towards Israel, then your overall odds of moving are going to be that 1 in 9 of moving times, if you're 80-20 towards Israel, so that makes you less likely to move in a pro-Palestine direction, that 1 in 9 times a 1 in 4 for the 80-20. So you actually only have a 1 to 36 odds of moving, or 1 in 37 probability of moving. Okay. For more information on relating odds and odds multiplication to probability, check out my video on how the ELO system works. I'll link that in the description. But yes, there's a chance of moving in the direction of the speaker's answer if you had an adjacent position to that particular answer. So, for example, if you held position 4, and the question that was being asked is the dividing line between positions 2 and 3, is that too far towards the low numbers or to the high numbers, right? So even if the speaker believed position 3 adjacent to yours, or I guess bad example there, because in that case the person in position 3 would be supporting the same thing that you do, so there would be no motion. But if someone's in position 1 or 2, right? It doesn't matter what that person's position was. If they're supporting something more than 1 step away from where you are, you're just not going to listen to that. But it will move your allegiance 1 step towards it. You say, okay, based on this argument, maybe this side aren't so much the good guys and the other side so much the bad guys as I thought. Right? Whereas if they're supporting something in line with what you're saying. So suppose that the speaker was in position 3, and they're saying, oh no, the question between positions 2 and 3, no, position 3 is the correct one, right? This question, on this question you side with the high numbers, right? So note that even though the speaker was towards the low number side of the listener, right? Speaker is position 3, listener is position 4. Because the speaker is supporting high numbers overall, right? As far as allegiance goes, this leads the person in position 4 to lean more towards the high numbers. Right? And the way I modeled that is I just said, okay, whichever direction you're moving, you look at the distance between where you are and where absolute extreme radicalization is, right? So between you and either 0 for low numbers or 100 for high numbers. You decrease that distance by 1/10. So if you're already if your allegiance was already a 60, and someone supported the high numbers, and you read that, so instead of being 40 away from 100, you're now only 36 away from 100. Your allegiance moves from a 60 to a 64, and that makes it even harder for you to ever consider a position that would have you move more towards the low numbers. So notice there are 2 things that move, right? There's some probability of your position actually moving, and consistently your allegiance will move. You'll say, maybe these guys aren't the good guys and those guys aren't the bad guys. Notice these probabilities I'm coming up with, they're just made up. I'd love to try to figure out what the true probabilities are on something like this. But under this model, that's what happens. Okay, so we model something based on all that. and check and see what happens. And here we've got the devastating result that made me want to grab this. Well, we found an explanation for polarization. Notice this is not just overall who has which opinions. This is breaking it down echo chamber by echo chamber. Notice that the left-leaning echo chambers that started with just a slight tilt to one side or the other, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, as you go from opinions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they pretty much go to 100 and 0 everywhere else. But the left-leaning echo chambers that started with only a slight tilt towards the low numbers had an extreme tilt towards extreme low numbers and proposing stuff that may violate the code of ethics that I had described in that video on refuting political extremism. And a great number of them have extreme allegiances towards the low numbers and the same happening towards the high numbers. Okay. Was it a mistake to grab this? Do I need to sober up before I can continue? Okay, sobriety test time. Can I sing the alphabet backwards? C, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Now I know my Z, Y, X. Which sobriety test should I try next? Okay, I'm fine. Moving on. So, let's try this even when one opinion specifically is better than the others. And I forgot which opinion. I didn't set 1 or 5, the extreme positions, to be better than the others. I think I might have set position 4 to be the better one. But as you can see, when we aggregate everything, right, these are not chamber by chamber positions graphs. This is everyone all combined into one. Right? So just the overall. You look at this. You've got the extreme polarization, and that polarization corresponds with extreme polarization not only in opinion but in allegiance, and corresponds to what you were expecting, right? That the low number echo chambers converge to the extremist position 1, with extreme allegiance of almost never budge towards the high number side, and the corresponding thing happening for the low numbers. Well, that's the main problem. It's going to make you consider this. Now, this itself isn't going to solve anything. So what will? Now, what I'm proposing here, and what I throw into this model here, is some sense of regulated speech. Saying, if you have some extremist position in the Israel-Palestine conflict, right, for extremist pro-Palestine stuff, you can't say that Israel was founded illegitimately. You can't say that in the current war, Israel's main goal is large-scale assassination and noticeable population reduction of the population of Gaza, okay? Because that is not in line with what's happening. You can't say that overall, right, you should just judge based on who's more powerful. Meanwhile, on the extreme pro-Israel side, you can't say that Jordan itself is intended to be the state of Palestine or the state for Arabs, right? When you're looking at time of partition plan and who lived where, right? West Bank and Gaza were Arab majority, and that wasn't breaking a deal or breaking a compromise. You can't say that the presence of an increasing number of Muslims in Europe constitutes a threat and that they all have dual loyalty, or that they're on some mission to Islamify the West. So, declare that whatever's in those extreme positions 1 and 5 is just off limits. That you arrange this that 10% of messaging is from PSA saying don't be an extremist. And that would have two effects. First of all, it means that anyone who is an extremist has the same chance of moving inward as you normally would from a conversation. It's based on your allegiance. It'll have the same effect on moving your allegiance. All that. Plain ordinary conversation. And the other effect it's going to have is that 90% of the time, a speaker who favors those positions, if questioned on those borders, right? So suppose you secretly favor position 1 even though you've got that messaging saying you can't say that. If they ask, the border of position 1.5, right? The border between positions 1 and 2. Which side are you on? If you secretly hold position 1, 90% of the time you just won't say anything. You'll just ignore it. So it gets fewer people, even those who actually believe it, fewer people saying the slightly moderate positions are too moderate and you have to really go extreme. Okay, so what happens when you do that? Well, we get limited polarization. It means that if you set boundaries, those boundaries will be held, right? That you, instead of having a lot of people on positions 1 and 5, you have them on positions 2 and 4. And echo chamber by echo chamber, it means that you've got on the low number of leading echo chambers, lots of 2s, a couple of 3s. High number of leading echo chambers, you have lots of 4s, a couple of 3s, but no 1s or 5s. So it's still not really what we want. If there's a slight preference, if there's a slight logical preference for one of that you want to converge to that, but maybe it's the best we can do. Turns out there's a chance of doing a little bit better stuff, but we'll see what that's going to involve, right? But first of all, that does mean saying. Yeah, I know people like to say, "Oh, you can't just restrict speech. The solution to bad speech isn't to restrict their speech. It's to have better speech." Yeah, but somebody has to actually have an organized campaign where you make the better speech happen, where you say that extreme position is wrong and this next one in is okay. And it does not mean being a free speech libertarian and just turning it into the wild west of opinion dynamics and hoping that things will just turn out okay. Because there's no reason to believe that they will. And it's not okay to say, I trust that they just will, and have that just be your dogma. Now, of course, we not only want people to avoid the absolute extremes, but if one position is actually better than the other, we want them to actually converge to it. So if position 3 were the most logical one, okay, we would actually get what we're looking for under that circumstance, and under some basic regulation. Having some amount of regulated speech. Now, what if the most logical position were off-center? Again, suppose position 4 were the correct position. So these show sometimes you do get full consensus at 4, sometimes you got some scragglers leading here, and then that would suggest, okay, that all of the high number leading echo chambers converge to 4. Some of the low number leading echo chambers stuck at 2. Others switch towards 4. And later, if you were to look at chamber by chamber, what happens? Yeah, that is actually what happens. If you want to look at that, I'll include a third link, but a link to where I'll have all the code for this posted. It's MATLAB code. If you have MATLAB, feel free to download the stuff, modify it, run it. If you can come up with better stuff than I've come up with, go for it. I may even make another video giving you all the credit for the research. And hopefully I won't be quite so drunk for it. Now, one speculation people could have is, so, again, relating to the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? Younger, more leftist Jews seem to be less Zionist. Right? Is that a matter of the anti-Zionist position being more the correct one? Like what we see over here. And I would argue no, there's another issue going on there. It's probably that you have this sort of speech regulation of saying you can't say that extreme thing, but more lopsided. Remember, what I proved was wrong and should be off limits in that political extremism video from almost 2 years ago. On one extreme, explicit racism, saying, I don't care if this is more just or more fair. I want to favor white people over non-white people. Right? We hear a lot of, no, you can't say that. Especially in younger communities, especially in leftist communities. And in terms of leftist extremism, saying, no, you can't just support whatever would make things more equal. Yeah, that borders on, saying that that's a problem, that borders on heresy. They don't send the message, you can't say that about that left-wing extremism. And so what if we model it based off of that? What if we say that in some of those chambers, you get the message, avoid position number 5, but you don't get something with saying avoid position number 1, and we don't have any specific favored position. And the results are something like this, where pretty consistently, I mean, position 1, which in this model would be, or in this context would be, well, we have to make things more equal, so it's okay to be bigoted against the European Jews, but not against the Arab Palestinians. So it's okay to say that the Jews should just move somewhere else. It's okay to support complete Arab conquest. And you never send the message of, if you support, if you cast your judgment based on whatever's making things more equal, that's just wrong. And that is an accurate description, I'd say, of what's happening in those left-leaning circles. And so now you can see that, huge support for the should be off limits position 1, and sometimes strong support for position 4, sometimes not. If it were position 3 instead of position 4 that was favored, you get almost complete convergence on the extremist, irrational, unethical, immoral position number 1. So we realize that some sorts of speech regulation can work better or worse than others. By the way, if position 4 was the more natural favored one, then you have semi-polarization. The left-leaning groups, left-leaning echo chambers, low-number-leaning echo chambers, all converge to position 1. High-number-leaning ones, they don't go all the way out to 5, or they realize that that's off-limits, but they stick at 4. So that is, again, if position 4 were the most logical one. So in that case, okay, so in that case, if the more logical position favored one side, not the other, by a little bit, okay, that one would actually win out. But not because that group is more logical, it's just that they've been bounded from going too far to one extreme. And you can see that it's true even looking at the individual echo chambers. All right. So now that we've seen what can go wrong if you only have moderation towards one side, well, is there a way to make that go right? What's interesting to note is on the previous example, the echo chambers that started leaning towards the high numbers, even though there was never an external PSA system preventing people from supporting position number one. Notice, that group never supported position number one. This idea of the free speech libertarian idea of support that a group itself can just prevent extreme positions by just talking amongst themselves, that works when it is an extreme position that the community allegiance is opposed to. However, when the community allegiance is okay with that general side, you can have people going too far to that side. And so now what happens if you measure what's called the magnetization? Okay, almost nobody, we talk about political polarization. We don't usually talk about political magnetization. What's magnetization? Magnetization is how far to the left or right a particular group is. Isn't that the same as polarization? No, polarization means people having distant opinions from each other. Essentially, some measure of given two random people, how likely are they to have opinions that are vastly different from each other? Magnetization means overall do things lean towards the low numbers or the high numbers? But now, if you really buck the trend here, right, everybody wants to have these PSAs that say, okay, yeah, we generally, culturally, we favor one idea. If you're completely off the rails in the opposite direction, we say, no, don't do that. What's emotionally harder, and what I feel like it's really hard to make happen, and why I grabbed this, is because I realized it's incredibly rare for people to actually say, yeah, we know that we support one particular side, that those extremists are on our side, but we still have to quite fervently say, no, don't say that. You can't say that even though you're on our side. We can't have our side winning through illegitimate means. So if the modern PSAs only target the extreme position in the direction that echo chamber community is leaning, then what happens? Well, you actually get a pretty decent balance. I mean, you can get some depolarization. But the real test, right? Depolarization is a sign of supporting the main goal, right? Really, what you want is a system where no matter what the correct, the more logical position is, people will converge to that more logical position, no matter where it is. So, if I chose position 4 to be the more logically favored, okay, under that idea of targeted moderation, you say, whichever side you're leading to, don't go too far towards that side. Suddenly, with position 4 being the more logical one, it holds, and you actually get what we're looking for, convergence towards that position. That's what we need, but you look at emotionally how hard it's going to be to convince people to do that. Conclusions: this free speech libertarianism model, where you just say, there's no need to say you can never say whatever it is. Yeah, that's malarkey. That I just don't see you being able to come up with something that supports that and can explain the sort of polarization that we've been observing. That opinion dynamics are what I would call semi-stable. That if you have an attempt at emerging polarization or extreme positions opposed to the prevailing allegiance, those will never see the light of day. They might briefly gain trace support and then be converted away. But it only does that towards one side. That extreme positions on the side supported by the majority, those are still just as dangerous and can rise to be the dominant ones. But that, yes, absolutely, lines should be drawn about what sorts of statements you can and can't say. You can't just say, oh, well, you have to be allowed to support this or that narrative. No, some narratives are slanderous. You can't say things to try to make people believe this, that, or the other. You can't say things to try to make people believe that Israel was founded under illegitimate means or in illegitimate conditions. You can't say things to make people believe that Palestinians have no right to live in the West Bank and Gaza. And the part that nobody's going to do is that we have to be extra vigilant about extremism from within our own political side. Well, unless that can actually happen, I'm not optimistic. I realize that alcohol isn't going to solve all my problems. I promise I don't do this very often, and I'll make sure that I don't do it very often in the future. But boy, was I down in the dumps tonight, realizing what the prospects were and weren't for successful resolution to this conflict and getting people to actually have reasonable opinions. One last thing to do.
רחמנה אדוני אלוהינו על איש עמך ועל שולם עירך ועל ציון משכן כבודך ועל מזבחיך ועל היכלך ובני שולם עיר הקודש במהרה בימינו עלינו לסוחר ושמחנו בעניינם ונאכל מפריה ונצבע מטבעה ונברך עליה בקדושה ובטהרה כי אתה אדוני טוב ומיטיב לכל ונודע לך על הארץ ועל פרי הגפן ברוך אתה אדוני על הארץ ועל פרי הגפן.
Hopefully I'll be more sober the next time that I make a video, the next time we meet. But until next time, this is Dr. Nighttime wishing you a good night.